Hey everybody, welcome to the channel. Today I'm going to show you how we made an extraordinary coffee from scratch, inspired by the famous Kopi Luwak. So what is Kopi Luwak? Well, Kopi Luwak is an Indonesian coffee that has a very unusual method of processing. It all starts with the Asian palm civet, or the Luwak. This animal cherry picks the coffee plant and eats nothing but the choicest, ripest berries. After a day or two, the civet leaves behind its excrement with undigested coffee beans. Eventually, once enough are picked, these beans are washed, dried in beds, roasted to perfection, leaving you with a steamy cup of delicious coffee. Cat poop not included. Kopi Luwak is one of the world's most expensive coffees, partially because of its limited availability, but also because of what actually happens when the civet eats the coffee cherry. As the bean is being digested, it's undergoing an enzymatic process known as proteolysis, where the proteins are being converted into amino acids, and all the while, it's being fermented by the natural gut bacteria of the civet cat. This produces a coffee bean that's, well, for a lack of a better way to put it, enhanced. Better flavor development, better aroma, and today we're going to try to duplicate this process without the Asian palm civet and without the poop. So I was fortunate enough to visit a local award-winning coffee plantation, Elida Estates, and they let me cherry pick their coffee trees, and that's what we're going to be working with. And our first challenge is to replicate the enzymatic process that happens inside the civet. So to make that happen, we're going to be using koji. Koji is a mold that contains over 50 types of enzymes, but most importantly, amylase and protease, and that's exactly what we're going to be looking for. To prepare our koji, we're going to pasteurize some rice flour. This is going to act as our medium for our koji as we sprinkle it all over our coffee beans. While that's cooling down, let me show you where this is going to incubate. Koji grows really well in high humidity and between an 85 and 95 degree temperature. So as we have our humidifier running, we've got a 100-watt incandescent light that's going to be providing us with the heat necessary to grow our koji. We're going to create a very nice warm environment. And these are the controllers that we're going to use to make that happen. This first controller is a temperature controller by Inkbird. It controls the temperature inside of our chamber. I've got it set at 90 degrees Fahrenheit, and it toggles the light on and off, keeping the temperature right about where I need it. The second controller is a humidity controller by Inkbird. I've got this controller set at 90%, and this is going to toggle on and off our humidifier, which is going to keep the humidity really high, allowing us to grow koji. Let's get started. We've got some fresh koji spores that we just bought, and our rice flour has now cooled to under 100 degrees. We're going to go ahead and add those koji spores to the rice flour and just give it a little mix. Once we've got that relatively well mixed, I'm going to sprinkle that spore mix directly onto the coffee beans. Now, fresh coffee beans are going to have a sweet, sticky mucus type membrane on the outer part of that coffee. So it's going to allow that spore mix to stick really well to it. But all we're going to do is take that, mix it around, and place it in a sanitized cheesecloth lined pan. I'm going to cover that with some saran wrap, leaving a gap on the right and left side for a little bit of airflow. And we're going to place this inside of our incubation chamber. After 60 hours of incubation, this is what our mold-covered koji coffee now looks like, and it smells incredible. If you're familiar with koji mold, you know it's going to have an earthy smell, a florally element to it, and as I start to break it up, it kind of also looks like the Kopi Luwak excrement. So far so good. Everything is working the way that I'm anticipating. We now need to duplicate the bacterial fermentation of the Kopi Luwak coffee. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our mold-covered koji coffee and we're going to place it inside of a 32-ounce mason jar. I'm going to be adding a liquid that is rich in lactic acid-producing bacteria. We've got a little sauerkraut juice, a little kefir whey that's going into this, and this is going to have a lot of gut-friendly bacteria that's going to anaerobically ferment our coffee beans. So all we have to do to finish this process is place an airlock directly on top of that mason jar, fill it up with water, and close it off. I'm going to ferment this for somewhere between 36 and 72 hours. And when it's finished fermenting, we're just going to go ahead and wash off our coffee beans. Right now it's coated in mold, rice flour, all kinds of really good stuff. And what we want to be left with is nothing but the bean itself. And it's going to have a slight parchment with an outer shell. We're going to get rid of that later. But this is what we're looking for at this stage. And it's now time to dry our coffee. Traditional methods of drying coffee include putting it on a drying bed. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to take this, place it in our greenhouse for 3 to 4 weeks. And what we're trying to do is lose about 35 to 45% moisture. And this is what our coffee beans look like now that that's been completed. So our coffee has been dried, fermented, and modified enzymatically. We're now going to age our coffee beans for 1 year as we place this into a controlled climate. I'm going to place it in my SALAMI chamber, which happens to be 80% humidity with a 55 degrees Fahrenheit temperature. And there it's going to hang out for 12 months. Now you can let it go a little bit longer. You can go a little bit less if you want, but aging the coffee develops its flavor, equalizes the moisture inside. And this is why it's so important to dry coffee properly, because if it's not dried properly during the aging process, you can get a lot of really bad mold growth. But as you can see, 12 months later, our coffee looks absolutely beautiful. Before we roast our coffee, we have to remove the outer parchment from the bean itself. And this is a relatively painstaking, laborious process, but thankfully, a friend of ours happens to have a parchment remover. So we're going to place our coffee beans into that parchment remover, and all it's doing is it's tossing and turning and grinding that parchment away. And this is what we're going to be left with. A coffee bean with about 90% of its parchment removed. As you can see, there is still some parchment on our coffee bean, so we're going to have to remove that manually before we roast it. And I'm also going to discard any broken pieces, as those could easily burn, ruining what could be potentially an exquisite cup of coffee. Once our parchment has been removed, it's now time to roast our coffee beans. And we're going to be using the Omo extra large capacity air fryer because it has a really cool rotating basket. We're going to set this to 400 degrees Fahrenheit, and I'm going to preheat it for about 30 minutes before I place my green coffee beans inside of it to roast. And what I'm looking for this particular coffee is a medium roast. It's been over a year since we've picked this coffee. And if you want to see the original video of our visit to the coffee plantation, be sure to stick around to the very end where I'm going to post a link to that video, where 1 pound of their Geisha coffee sold for over $1,000. That's got to be a record or something. So we're now going to brew up a cup. And I got to tell you, the smells coming from this coffee are extraordinary. This coffee is incredible. Let me give some to Cecilia. Very difficult to describe. Florally like jasmine flowers, tamarindo, hints of chocolate, caramel, and toffee. This coffee has no bitterness whatsoever. Strangely enough, it's slightly sweet as I'm drinking it black. It's very, very aromatic and a little earthy. I gotta say, this imitation Kopi Luwak, this Koji coffee, was single-handedly the best cup of coffee I've ever drank. I'd consider this a success. Thanks for watching. If you got any questions, let me know in the comment section. And if you're new to our channel, we'd like to say welcome. Don't forget to subscribe, like, comment, and share. We'll see you in the next one.